Monday, October 14th, 7:42 p.m. I remember the exact time because I checked my phone the moment the road behind me disappeared. Earlier that evening, I had been driving through a long stretch of forest on my way to visit a friend in a small town about 2 hours away. I had taken the trip before, but this time the main highway was closed for construction, so my GPS rerouted me through a back road that cut straight through miles of woodland. It looked normal enough on the map, just a thin gray line surrounded by green. I didn't think much of it. The sun had already dipped low by the time I turned onto that road, and the sky had taken on that dim bluish color that happens right before night settles in. The forest on both sides felt unusually dense, tall pines leaning inward slightly as if the branches were trying to meet above the pavement. My headlights stretched forward into the dark like narrow tunnels of pale light. The strange part was how empty the road felt. I had been driving for nearly 40 minutes without passing another car. No houses, no side roads, just the quiet hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of tires rolling over old pavement. Around 7:30, my GPS lost signal for the first time. The map froze and the voice navigation cut off mid-sentence. I figured it was just the trees blocking the connection. It happens sometimes in remote areas. I kept driving, assuming the road only went one direction anyway. A few minutes later, I noticed something that made me slow down. The trees had started to look repetitive. At first, I told myself it was just because every pine tree looked similar, but the arrangement of them felt oddly familiar. A tall, split trunk leaning slightly over the road, a cluster of 3 thin trees growing close together, a broken branch sticking out at eye level. I could have sworn I had already passed those exact same shapes 10 minutes earlier. That's when I checked the time. 7:42 p.m. The numbers glowed faintly on my phone screen as the car rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. I sat there listening to the engine idle, staring ahead into the darkness between the trees. Something about the road suddenly felt wrong in a way I couldn't quite explain. Not dangerous exactly, just out of place, like I had driven farther than the road should logically allow. I opened my car door and stepped outside, mostly because I needed to clear my head for a moment. The forest air was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that slips through your clothes instantly. When I turned around to look back the way I had come, that's when I realized something impossible had happened. The road behind me was gone. I don't mean it faded into darkness or became hard to see. I mean it simply wasn't there anymore. The pavement stopped a few feet behind my car, and beyond that there was only forest. Dense, silent, untouched forest, as if no vehicle had ever driven through it before. For a few seconds, I genuinely thought I was disoriented. I walked behind the car, expecting to find the road again once I stepped around a bend or looked from a different angle, but every direction showed the same thing. Tall trees, dark soil, scattered pine needles, and no sign of pavement or tire tracks anywhere. I remember standing there trying to make sense of it, my breath fogging faintly in the cold air. Roads don't just disappear. That thought kept repeating in my head, like a rule I was trying to enforce on reality. I grabbed my phone again and opened the map, but the blue location dot had frozen in place and the signal bars were empty. The road on the screen still existed, but according to the GPS, I wasn't moving anymore. I looked ahead toward the direction I had been driving. The pavement continued forward between the trees exactly as it had before, straight, narrow, and vanishing into darkness. For a moment, I considered getting back into the car and continuing down it, but something about the silence made that feel like a mistake. There were no insects, no wind moving through the branches, just a thick quiet that pressed against my ears. I shut off the engine and the headlights died with it, leaving the road lit only by the faint blue glow of the evening sky. The forest seemed to close in immediately. I stood there for a minute listening, half expecting to hear another car somewhere in the distance, but nothing came. Eventually, I decided the smartest thing to do was walk forward a little and see if the road reconnected with something. Maybe I had taken a wrong turn earlier without noticing. I locked the car out of habit, slipped my phone into my pocket, and started down the road on foot. At first, everything felt normal enough. The pavement crunched lightly under my shoes where small stones had gathered along the edges. The trees remained dense on both sides, their trunks tall and straight like dark pillars rising into the fading sky. But after about 5 minutes of walking, the air grew noticeably colder. It wasn't gradual, it felt more like crossing an invisible line where the temperature suddenly dropped. My breath began to show more clearly with each exhale. The quiet deepened too. Even my footsteps sounded slightly muted, as if the forest was absorbing the noise before it could travel anywhere. That's when I saw the wooden post ahead of me. It stood alone on the side of the road, about chest height, with a small rectangular sign nailed crookedly to the top. At first, I assumed it was a trail marker or some kind of property boundary sign, but the closer I got, the more unusual it looked. The wood was weathered gray, cracked with age, yet the carved letters on the sign were sharp and clear, like they had been cut recently. I stepped closer to read them. "You are already here." I stared at the words for a few seconds, trying to understand what they were supposed to mean. There were no arrows, no other directions, just that single sentence carved into the wood. I actually laughed a little under my breath when I saw it, mostly because it felt like someone's idea of a strange roadside joke, maybe local hikers messing with travelers. I pulled out my phone and took a quick picture of it before continuing down the road. But after a few steps, something made me glance back over my shoulder. The post was gone, completely gone. The spot where it had stood now held nothing but undisturbed soil and a layer of pine needles. I walked back a few steps, scanning the ground, convinced I must have misjudged the location. But there was no hole where a post had been planted, no broken wood, nothing, just forest. That was the moment when the uneasy feeling in my chest started to grow stronger. Still, I kept moving forward. I told myself the road had to lead somewhere eventually. The trees stretched on for several more minutes before finally thinning out ahead. A pale opening appeared through the trunks, like a small clearing waiting beyond the forest. When I stepped out of the tree line, I immediately saw the building in the center of it. A long, low structure that looked like an old roadside motel. 8 doors lined up evenly along the front wall. Faded yellow paint peeling away from the boards. A crooked wooden sign hanging above the entrance canopy with lettering so worn it was almost unreadable. The gravel lot surrounding it looked untouched, yet somehow the place didn't feel abandoned. It felt present, like it had been waiting there quietly for a long time. And standing in that clearing, with the road gone behind me and the forest completely still around me, I had the unsettling realization that I had somehow arrived at a place that shouldn't exist at all.